Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Pelvis. I'm Laura Haraka, a somatic practitioner, breathwork facilitator, and someone who's been on the healing journey myself. I know what it's like to live with chronic symptoms and feel disconnected from your body, and I also know how powerful it can be when we start to listen, slow down, and heal from the inside out. On this podcast, we talk about the mind-body connection, nervous system healing, pelvic health, and all the messy, beautiful layers that come within learning to trust your body again. Whether you're brand new to this work or deep in your process, I'm so glad you're here. So let's dive in. So welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pelvis. And today I am honored to welcome a guest who has been a guiding light in the mind-body healing world, Dr. Dan Ratner. Dan is a mind-body expert who has helped thousands of people find freedom from chronic symptoms by understanding the brain's role in pain. And one of the most powerful tools Dan has developed is his 3-column technique, a process that invites people to explore their symptoms through the lens of doubt, fear, and emotional themes. And by addressing these layers, he helps people rewire their nervous system for safety, clarity, and relief. So welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Laura. Really great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's really great to be on, you to come on my podcast now after I've been on yours.
Full circle.
Yes, exactly. So let's dive in right away. If you could, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you came into this mind-body world to do what you do.
Sure. So I've been a therapist since 2004, or actually even before if you count my training. But I didn't specialize in mind-body work. I came to that through a very personal experience, as you know, which is when I was 28 years old, I developed back pain. At first, just a little twinge, and then it got really, really out of control and bad and everyday chronic back pain. And I didn't have any sense that I was ever going to get out of it. I was not getting good messages from the medical community. I couldn't really make sense of the alternative medicine world. Even when I would try things, nothing made sense. And I basically just settled into a life that was very different. I had given up playing basketball, which I had played every day of my life for a long, long time. It's my favorite sport. Started sitting in straight back chairs and thinking about mattresses and thinking about posture and movements. It dominated my whole life. And so to make a long story short, even if I've already made it long, I discovered the works of Dr. John Sarno, and thankfully, but I remember thinking, why did this take 8 years for me to discover this guy who outlined things that were so clearly true? It was the first time that I not only made sense in terms of my symptoms, but I found it was the book that made sense of who I am in a much broader sense, not just the symptoms. But then I still had questions. And so the reason I ended up developing the system that I did is that I found that I got the basis of all of my work from Dr. Sarno. But one of the things that I pulled from it is that he said you have to accept the diagnosis. And I realized that his certainty was such a key component of me getting better. Like the certainty that my mind was the key link in why my physiology was playing out the way that it was not structural, that I wasn't in danger. But I needed to be certain of that. And I even needed to be certain after I read Dr. Sarno. I had to go through and answer all these questions for myself. And the system that I've developed, which is called the 3-column system, it basically divided the experience in such a way that I could see what was happening at each moment in my mind and how it was playing out in my brain. Through the emotions, through doubt, which I would call thinking is another way of thinking about it, and then what I call power, which is about your relationship with the self. So these 3 areas determine everything that's happening in my brain and in anybody's brain, and then that translates to what happens in the body. So I work with people to get them the information they need to understand how to work with that.
Right. And let's just back up a minute. It's kind of amazing to me, and it's still amazes me today that when we go to a doctor, they don't know about Dr. Sarno's work, and they don't even ask what's happening in your life when you go for back pain.
Right. It's like they think of us like we're cars, which is really interesting because our minds are capable of doing all kinds of things that a piece of machinery cannot do. And we keep treating ourselves like we're cars, so that you go in with a back problem and they say, well, what's the structural issue? And yet, as we know, I learned this through Sarno first, but I found it to be true in spades. All the research shows there's no correlation between those structural things we're seeing and what happens in the body. which is
Right.
telling. It would be like going to an auto mechanic and being like, well, I think it's your carburetor. And then they look and they're like, oh, this is a car that isn't even built with a carburetor. And then they're just like, it's
Right.
still your car.
Right. Yeah. 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 It's just amazing to me. I had a health issue the end of 2024, and I was treated for an infection. And I said to the doctor, no one has asked me what's happening in my life that has caused my body to create an infection.
Yes. Yeah. What did the doctor say? I'm curious.
She said, leave me your flyer and I'll get back in touch with you.
And then didn't.
And then didn't. Yes, I've never heard from them, but which is okay. But it's so important to really delve into what's happening in someone's life when we actually have a physical issue.
Yeah, and I would say it makes all the sense in the world because we already know that the mind affects the body, even just in little ways. Like when I was writing my book, one of the things that came to me, I just realized I was like, wait a minute, crying is a mind-body symptom. You have usually sadness, it can come from happiness also, and it actually changes your tear ducts. That's just one, and blushing is another example that people talk about in the mind-body field a lot, where your blood flow changes with embarrassment. If that can already happen, why are we not asking these questions when we're having a physical issue, especially one that's not clearly tied to some violent injury or clear illness?
Exactly. Something the doctors are missing the boat. Absolutely. So you said that certainty was extremely important for you. And I know your whole motto is, crushing doubt. So I'm just would like it if you would talk a little bit more about why certainty was so important in your recovery and in other people's recovery and your clients.
So the first thing that I'll say is if we know that the mind is creating all kinds of experiences in the body, then we actually have to get control of the mind to some degree, or really to a large degree. And if we have doubt, we don't have control. Doubt runs all over the place, and it's very easy for doubt to bring a thought into our heads that gets us worried. The whole idea here is that we need to feel safe in our bodies. We need to know there's nothing that is going to keep us in this state. We need to know that there's nothing wrong, because otherwise we sink into the fear and threat physiology of the whole thing. If you have doubt, even in subtle ways, it can perpetuate that kind of experience. Because you know what? It's like people say we fear what we don't know. That's what's happening right there. We don't know. We're not hearing it from anyone else. So we have all kinds of fears building up. And that just gets channeled into the body. I mean, what I found from experience is that as I kind of fiddled with things and tried to figure out what my symptoms were expressing and how to deal with them, I found that sometimes the things I was doing worked and sometimes they didn't. And I tried to figure out why. And the main common theme that I came up with is the reason they didn't work when they didn't work is I really wasn't believing it. But if I was believing it, it did work. And it's just what Sarno said. You have to believe it. You have to accept the diagnosis or you don't get better. So it's almost like it's taking it into the realm of recognizing accepting the diagnosis is not something you just do once. You've got to do it again and again and in different situations.
So tell me, how do you get your clients to put 100% belief in? And is 100% necessary to heal?
Okay, great questions. I'll start with the first. In terms of getting the people I work with to come around and feel less doubt, a huge part of it is actually just identifying that the doubt is there. They don't even realize it was there. So I call that observing the doubt. Like you've got to recognize it's even there. So that's the first step, is to observe. The next is to articulate it, to get it put into words. Well, what are you actually doubting? Because a lot of times we don't even know that. And the thing is, when you put it into words, you can hear what you're thinking. And then you can actually evaluate, is this true or not? And what I have found is when people articulate their doubts, a lot of times they're like, that doesn't make sense. Like I had a woman talk to me about how she thought she was lactose intolerant and couldn't have cheese. But then she recognized, well, wait, I eat pizza. Like there's cheese in pizza.
Right.
And just by articulating it, she realizes this doesn't make sense anymore.
And saying it out loud, sometimes you're like, wait, that doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm. And so, when people get to hear what they're saying, they get to take a good look at it. And very frequently, it's not making a whole lot of sense. So the way that I work with people is we simply have a discussion about it to access whatever they're thinking. Because I say this all the time, what I think doesn't matter as much. What I think matters in that it's good inputs to work with, but the brain they walk away with is theirs. So it doesn't matter if I'm certain. It matters if they're certain. Now I'll get to your second question. Does it need to be 100%? I would say the answer to that is definitive no. Because Who's 100% certain of anything? However, I want to get it as close to that as possible. And I want whatever percentage of doubt that is there to be really, really quite low. Very low levels of doubt are not going to do much.
Right.
But high levels of doubt where you're 99% sure, but you're 1% really not sure, that's a very potent doubt. So it's not really about percentages. It's about the strength of the doubt. So you
Right.
could have some low level doubt and it could creep in and out here and there. Now, that being said, there are things that I am totally certain about. Like I'm totally certain about my system. I'm certain that this is the way that I need to go about it and that a lot of people need to go about it. There's many people in the mind-body field who are doing great work. And here's another thing I'm certain about. I'm certain that the mind-body experience is a dominant force in our society, well beyond anything that people outside of our field knows.
Right.
Like by a factor of, I don't know, a million.
Mhm.
It's pretty big. Oh, I think there are things we can become certain about. I'm totally certain that my back pain was mind-body. There's no part of me that thinks maybe there was some injury that just healed. I don't think that at all.
Right.
Based on the way things went. So we can get to 100% certainty, and that's great if we can. It is not required, but we're working towards it. And we don't want any of that, a small percentage, to be too strong.
Right. Yeah. I remember reading Unlearn Your Pain by Dr. Schubner when I first found this world. And I remember going to my therapist and telling them I have a mind body condition. And they kept trying to tell me, but wait, why don't we just try this supplement or this type of body wash or whatever it was? And I would literally say, stop, do not put doubt in my head. I'm going full force, 100%. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, that's great. You know, when people ask me sometimes, what is it okay to take a medication? Is it okay to do an exercise? And my rule of thumb is it doesn't matter what you do, it matters what you're thinking while you do it. And so if it causes doubt, don't do that.
Right.
If it can bring down your doubt and maybe bring you relief along the way, that's fine. I don't have any objection to that. It ultimately comes down to the fact that for a mind-body symptom to get better, we have to know that's what it is. And if we're being prescribed information that makes us doubt that, we're not going to believe that. We're going to head in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. I say the exact same thing to my clients. You know, they say, can I take a Tylenol or can I do this? And I said, you can, but know in your brain, you're doing this as a form of self-care so you don't have to struggle. Not for the fact that this is possibly not a mind-body condition and it's a physical condition.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's really relieving for people because then, you know, they don't feel boxed into, I've got to be so, you know, dogmatic about the mind-body experience. But at the same time, we stay on task. We recognize, I don't want you buying into another narrative. This is mind-body. You can treat it in many different ways because it is mind-body. It's real in the body.
Exactly.
But anything that takes you away from that idea can not only feed problems, it also can completely derail your problem.
Right.
Because suddenly you're like, well, I don't know. That did bring me relief. Maybe it's this thing. And then you're back in the circle again.
And it provides confusion for the brain. Is it physical? Is it not physical? Which way do you want me to go?
Yeah. Yeah. And by thinking about my column system, I say that every single moment you're either working against doubt or for it. Every single moment. When you decide to do something, is it working for doubt or against it? And you want it to be working against it.
Right. Exactly. So you brought up the column system. So I think you're the only one that deals with this type of system that I've heard in the mind-body world. And I'm just curious if you could tell our viewers a little bit about each column and how you work with it. That would be great.
Sure. So I'll try to sum it up. But as I often say to everyone who asks me any questions, ask your follow-up question because this is just my first answer.
Right.
Everything's a dialogue. So here's what I came to see. You know, as I read Dr. Sarno, I knew that accepting the diagnosis was important. I knew that the emotions were important, but I didn't really know when. I didn't even fully know why, even though he explained a lot of really good stuff. But as I explored things, what I came to is that emotional experience has its driving force is mostly for the onset of the symptom or a sudden uptick in the symptom. Like I didn't have 8 years of back pain because of emotions.
Right.
I had an onset of back pain because of emotions. And then I had 8 years of back pain because of doubt. I believed I was broken. And I was told I was broken. And I had no indication that I was going to get better. So it was all about the belief system. So I think of it, it's almost like a relay race, except at the beginning is very short. The first runner just runs a little bit. That's the emotions. And then doubt's like, oh, well, I can go for, you know, however long you need. And usually it just runs out a lot of the rest of the race. So the way that I think about it is the symptom presentation tells us part of where we need to work. Did the symptom just happen? Or are you trying to figure out why it started? There I would look at emotions. And when I say that, I mean unconscious emotions, things we're just not aware of. And if we discover them, it can take away those acute symptoms. So acute symptoms I work on largely with the emotions column. The doubt column is for thoughts that are perpetually the same. So I have a term in the doubt column that I call consistently acute. Nothing's chronic, because chronic implies there's an underlying condition that's going to keep it going. Consistently acute, it presents the same way as chronic. It's always there, consistent. But it's actually acute in that if we know what's underlying it, we can actually get rid of that way of thinking, change the whole mind-body experience, and start to shift symptoms out of the seemingly chronic state.
I love that, consistently acute. It sounds a lot easier to hear than I have chronic pain.
I mean, chronic pain sounds very scary because
Scary as all hell, right?
anything that's chronic implies it's not going away.
Right.
So now I'll get to the power column I didn't even discover until I got rid of my symptoms. What I found is once I broke up the chronicity, the seeming chronicity, with using doubt methods, and then started to get more control over the acute symptoms with the emotions column. For a while, I thought there were just two columns. And I thought, okay, we work with emotions or we work with doubt. And then what I found is, but this is really weird. Now that I resolved the symptoms, I feel more powerful in my own life than I ever did before. And I started living in greater alignment with myself. It was as if the symptoms had been talking to me and telling me how I really wanted to live. And if I just listened to them, I would align with myself and it would start taking care of some other problems. So what I found is that the power column is something that I usually bring in after doubt is down. The flow of my system is bring down doubt, learn about the emotions, and then everything flows towards power. Because the symptoms to me, have three different functions. At the beginning, in those onsets and upticks, it's a distraction, just like Dr. Sarno said. The symptom comes in because you don't want to be aware of something, and there's nothing more distracting than a really bothersome physical symptom. In the doubt column, though, the purpose is not distraction. The purpose is protection. We have like this helicopter parent who thinks that we're in danger all the time. And so it's always trying to protect. Watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out for this. But it takes it so far that we're paralyzed. And then in the power column, it's not distraction or protection, it's communication. This is the part of the symptom. This is the part of us in our bodies that knows all the things, the traumas, and it's all stored in there. And it wants us to connect. So the flow is, okay, let's relax the need for protection and be able to do something with it. Let's get rid of the distraction so that we can get emotional awareness. And then let's receive the communication. What is my body actually trying to tell me? But it's got to go in that flow. If you treat the symptoms as just a communication right from the outset, you might be missing the fact that doubt is piling onto things and not be able to go anywhere. Or you might not have the emotional awareness that you would get if you get rid of the distraction first. So these three columns allow me to look at any given moment. And I kind of think in columns now in my life in general. And I can look at any given moment and be like, oh yeah, okay, that was a moment where power dipped and then my doubt went way up. And then I freaked out and had an emotions column symptom in response to it. And so they feed each other. But you need to know what came first.
Right. Yeah. And I think crushing the doubt is really always the first thing to do. And it's the first thing I do with all my clients and I have them always write an evidence journal out. Because if you have all this doubt, you can do all the other work, but it semi negates it.
And people can forget their progress. They can completely forget that it was, or they'll think, oh, that wasn't real. You know, the good stuff, that was just me living in a fantasy. The bad stuff's real. I find it's actually pretty much the opposite. That the bad stuff we feel is all doubt, and it's just, I call doubt a pathological liar. It's always wrong. Whereas the good stuff was actually real.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The good stuff is real. I like that.
Yeah. We almost can't believe that that's the way it is because it's so in line with what we would hope.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. It is true. And you're so right. People, clients, even myself, we forget our progress and we don't see the little shifts happening and our pain going down. And we forget that we're actually making progress along the way.
Yeah, and that will happen even more if things aren't making sense. If it feels random, then you'll be like, well, yeah, I did get better, but I don't know why, and it doesn't seem to stay, and so I have this perpetual problem.
Right.
We've got to get it understood.
And one of the big things people ask me, so I'll ask you for your explanation with doubt, is that it hurts so bad. And sometimes, neuroplastic symptoms hurt worse than physical, something that was actual physical, a cut on the arm or something like that. And I'm just curious, how do you crush doubt with that?
Well, one of the first lines of defense that I have is very similar to what you just said, which is that actually, by far, the worst symptoms I've ever had have all been mind body. So the severity of the symptom not being mind body actually runs completely counter to my experience. So I share with them, listen, it is very typical that these are more severe. And then what happens is we usually end up reflecting on what their experiences have been like. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember like I broke a bone and it didn't hurt as much as this. And that's very telling. I mean, a broken bone, that's big time stuff. And yet did not hurt as much as my back pain.
Right.
Not at all. And so we look at the evidence. That's part of it. But the other thing is you've got to attack doubts wherever they rest. So there's no one size fits all. I'm always working with the mind that I'm working with. So I have to find out where the doubts are. Why do you think that a severe symptom couldn't be caused by mind-body experience? Even just asking that question can wake people up. We all make assumptions. We're making an assumption when we say a physical structural problem would lead to more pain than a mind-body problem. Why? We actually have to think about that. Like, why would that be?
Why can't neuroplastic pain hurt more than physical pain?
Yeah. Well, and here's another method that I use, which is, to me, the way I think about the mind-body process, and this is one of the many questions I asked when I read Sarno and didn't feel like I had full answers, though he did a beautiful job to a certain point, for sure, especially at that point in our history.
Right.
But as I looked at these things, I needed to know the physical mechanism. And one thing that I came to is that this is a line that I use frequently. If the body can do it, the mind can use it, which means any physical function, including severe ones, can be activated by the mind.
Right.
So I think of severity as a tell that it is mind-body usually, but at the same time, you can have a mind-body tiny little itch or sneeze all the way up to a migraine or crippling pain or, violent stomach distress, all of it. The body can already do it. We know the mind can control certain body things. Why can't it control the rest of it? And the answer is it can. And I even have the mechanism, it's the hormones from the brain. Those are the chemical messengers that can control any part of the body to do what it can already do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I talk about the reason it hurts more sometimes is because there's such more of an emotional charge. There's so much fear.
Yep.
I mean, how many times when we were growing up did our parents or caregivers say, well, that must be neuroplastic pain that you have? We go to a doctor and we say, if it's a broken arm, they would put a cast on or a sling, and that you're getting help and it's going to heal. Neuroplastic pain is so new that, not really new, but it's new to a lot of people. And it's, we don't know how it's going to play out. We know that when we go to the doctor, they say, oh, our arm will heal in 6 to 8 weeks.
Right. Well, one of the studies that I found in looking at all these things that sheds light on just what you said is, I don't remember who did the study offhand, but there was a study where they had two groups, and one looked at kind of neutral stimuli, and then another looked at scary images. And then they tested their pain levels doing the exact same activities afterwards. And the people who had looked at the scary images had higher pain responses, which wouldn't surprise me or you. But, for people who are listening and wondering about this, I think it makes sense, but it doesn't matter what I think. It matters how each of you are thinking about it. But think about, why wouldn't it make sense? It puts your nervous system on high alert. Here's another way of thinking about it. I mean, if you're in danger, you need to be sensing things more sensitively. You need to be looking out for them more. So all of your nerves are just on high alert.
Right.
You're going to feel it more, which is another reason that the severity of the symptoms can often point to the fact that there's a neuroplastic symptom happening, a neuroplastic process that involves the brain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good explanation.
Thanks. You got to think these things through. I actually hadn't explained it just like that, but one of the things I love about the work that I do is from all angles it makes sense. And here's another angle, Laura. I don't know if you've gotten to read my book yet, and I won't put you on the spot. You don't have to answer. But there is a part in the evidence-based chapters where I talk about how this is not new information. We have known this for millennia. It's in all of philosophy and history and literature, and it's even in our language. If you listen to body metaphors, We're
Right.
constantly saying things like, he's a pain in the neck, or you make me sick. But we
Mhm.
stopped believing at some point, and it was largely when medicine, Western medicine, took a turn towards the literal. And we
Mhm.
just started thinking of that as like, that's just pretty metaphors. It's not. Metaphors always come from someplace real.
I really believe in symbolism, and I recently got a divorce. And I just told you about, I had the infection in my foot, and I believe it was me being afraid to put my best foot forward.
Yeah. Actually, when it comes to emotions column themes, I think they're very, very metaphorical. And, foot issues are everywhere. Putting your foot
Yeah.
down, taking the next step, all of these metaphors, they mean something. And I think you're completely right.
And I've hurt my foot 4 times in the last year. 2 sprained ankles, I cut it, and an infection.
Well, you might be doubting that you shot yourself in the foot, but you did not. I trust that you know where you're going with things, but it's the feet, they're how we travel.
Exactly.
They're how we move forward.
Yeah. So you brought up the emotions column. So tell me a little bit how you work with the emotions column. A lot of people think they have to journal. I'm an SEP, somatic experiencing practitioner, and I'm big in feeling everything in the body. So I'm just curious how you tackle the emotions column.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways to do things. I'm not saying my way of doing it is the way to do it. I think there's a lot of great, successful aspects of things that people are doing out there. But what I find is most important is to know when to do what. So, like, if you're journaling and you're getting really good information, great. Keep doing that. But if you are journaling and all you're writing down is things that are making you afraid and you're not getting new insights and you're feeling like journaling's the way out, but I don't know how I'm doing it, that's just raising your doubt. So you have to figure out what to do when. And my way of thinking about this is that if the emotions are being distracted from by the symptom, then our job is to discover what we're distracting away from as quickly as possible. So what I do in the emotions column is I help people create what I call an emotional themes menu. I ask them the question, can you write down or just share with me the things that bother you most in life? General broad themes. When people disrespect me, when people undermine my reality or gaslight, when people don't think I know what I'm talking about. I could make up hundreds of these.
Yeah, we can go on.
We can go on and on. People not trusting, or one of mine is like, I hate when people use projection. I hate when they tell me I'm doing what they're doing. Oh, God, that bothers me.
Mhm.
And when we know what these themes are, what it does is when there's an onset or an uptick, you've got your completed list. And by the time you're done with the list, it should be like, you look at it and you're like, yeah, those are the things I hate. And when you have an onset or an uptick, you can look at that list and be like, no, not that one. No, no, no. Oh, there it was. So it's like a shortcut. It's a shortcut to emotional awareness. We've got a list. Usually when people go into a therapy session, let's say, they go in and they talk about it and they look
Mhm.
for things, but it's not quite so organized and shortcut oriented to be able to
Mhm.
get you right there. And I find that's important because people really want to get control of those acute symptoms fast and sometimes really fast. Like if you're feeling nauseated, you want to be able to look at that and be like, okay, yes, here was somebody talking about, let's say, like father issues, and that kind
Mhm.
of stuff really gets me. If you can pinpoint that, you can actually get rid of the symptom right then and there with that awareness.
Right.
So people want that shortcut, and I built a way to do it. Now, of course, I built all of this for myself first. This
Mhm.
was my system with me. I didn't actually know how well it would work with other people, but when I started trying it out, I was like, I think I don't know if I stumbled on it or I just thought it out, but I got to a place where it felt like this is kind of describing the human condition. And so now we've got an access point with this emotional themes menu where you have something you can do about it. And by the way, that also brings down doubt because you have something you can do about it instead of thinking,
Right.
oh my God, I'm stuck with this symptom.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very similar to something I've done myself, just writing down. And I was a math teacher before this
Oh,
world
yeah,
that
I
I'm
have a
in
math
now.
mind. That's funny.
Yeah, so I have spreadsheets that I use. And I had a spreadsheet with my triggers
Hmm.
and then what that made me feel about me. And when I was able to identify the trigger, I was able to see the symptom go up and I realized, oh, I have control over this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, actually that's an important point also to remember is it's not only when your symptoms go down that you can see this correlation. A lot of times it's when your symptoms go up. That is when I first discovered, oh my God, what Dr. Sarno said was actually right. Not that I doubted him hugely. I would really, from the moment I read him, I was like, he's making sense. This is headed somewhere. But when I saw I had a symptom uptick with my back pain. This is before I got rid of the back pain. And the symptoms went way up at a particular moment that was related to this therapist that I didn't get along with for multiple reasons. And it was right when he went away. And I think inside I was feeling that he just didn't really care about me. But I wasn't experiencing that way. And this actually goes back to that idea about severity. You mentioned this. There's an emotional component that can really up it. You're hurting twice. You're hurting physically and emotionally. And seeing that link was so convincing. Like I needed that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's important. It really is. And actually, I always found it more important and a more important message when I saw the symptoms go up, because then I can understand why they were going up.
You usually get more information from the symptoms going up than from them going down.
Right.
Them going down, it could be that it was just enough time had passed. It's not that big of a deal. It just kind of died away because you weren't believing it was going to be some kind of problem. But when the symptoms go up, you get a huge clue about things.
Exactly. At one point, I felt like it was my barometer of, okay, what do my symptoms want me to do now? Does it want me to go here or does it like that?
You know what's funny, Laura, is like I consider myself a very emotionally aware person. And I think certainly cognitively I am. But there are many times where my body's like, you aren't getting it, man. And I just have like certain barometers in my body. And I've learned I have a relationship to each of these symptoms. So when a certain kind of emotion comes up, it manifests in the way that it does in my body. Oh, that's my knee pain thing when I'm missing somebody, or that's my adrenaline rush down the side of my back when I'm feeling competitive, or that's a headache that comes on when I feel that somebody's being a headache. It can be very metaphorical, but my body's just expressing things all the time that I think I'm fine, and it turns out I'm not. I've learned to trust my body more than my mind.
Absolutely. Me too. Me too. And each symptom can mean something different. And then once we know that, we can address it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I find, though, separating it out of the columns was important for me because I didn't know when to think emotionally and when to think about what my doubts were and when to think about power. And this system allows me to figure out when do I think about what, which thing led to what, and what do I need to work on.
Right. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the power column. Does that include personality traits that people have, like people pleasing or perfectionism?
It definitely does, but I want to say one quick caveat first, which is in the power column, the way I think about it, you don't have to change who you are at all. So even if you discover certain character elements are contributing in some way, what we need to do is change how we utilize those characteristics. You don't have to be different. In fact, people are who they are generally. It's pretty hard for them to be so different. So the good news is you don't need to be, but it does factor that in because a lot of great qualities can lead to lowered power. People pleasing is certainly one of them. You're in a situation and you can feel empathy is another great one. Feeling all those things from everybody. You can see the other perspective. You feel you've got to people please. Suddenly you're under a lot of pressure. You're not in power with yourself then. And when I say in power with yourself, I don't mean that you've got to just do what you want all the time and disregard everything else. It's not going the opposite direction, but it's important to recognize that when you're experiencing these things, we just got to be better aware of them and maybe channel it a bit differently. So maybe you're still going to people please, but you're not going to do it to that degree. Or maybe you're going to recognize, okay, I'm a people pleaser, but you got to be good to me also, or else I'm not going to do that. There are some requirements here.
Right.
It's not indiscriminate anymore. So the power column is where we make adjustments to our relationship with ourselves. We recognize when we're not feeling aligned with ourselves and figure out how to do it. And it's not about becoming selfish and just thinking about yourself. You can still be super generous and a goodist, as Sarno put it, and all that stuff. But you need to know that you also have to treat you well. You have to be one of the people that you treat well.
So self-care kind of comes in this power column, listening to what your body needs.
It's huge. Even in little ways, like if you're running late to a meeting, I used to freak out about that. I used to think, what are they going to think? Oh my God, I got to get there.
I used to too.
And at a certain point, I realized I'm not doing anybody any good by doing that. Even the people who are waiting for me. Like it doesn't help them. It's bad for me. Now, if I'm saying things to myself that help me take responsibility for something or do a better job, fine. But a lot of times I realize I am torturing myself in this moment for no reason. It doesn't help anyone else. It doesn't help me. What I can do instead is soften it and say, oh, it happens. So you meant to be on time. you'll leave a little bit early next time. But you don't have to rake yourself over the coals for this. Instead, you come in, you say, I'm so sorry for being late. And the sooner you let it go, the better that is for everybody. It's not only not gonna help them to have you berate yourself, but it's also not gonna help if you sit down and for the first 20 minutes you're spinning in your head and not even hearing what they're saying because you're thinking, oh my God, I gotta make it up to them.
Yeah. It's usually all about what we're thinking about ourselves. They probably don't even care so much. And for me, I would get a flare every time I was late somewhere. I don't anymore, thankfully. But I had to think about the meaning behind being late, what that meant about me. And the next time it happened, I was able to address it with myself by having a conversation. Oh, that doesn't mean that me. I'm a good person.
Yeah. And you can walk yourself through the situation, but one of the things I love about power column work is you find a broader solution for that, where you kind of, instead of each and every time reminding yourself you're a good person, you actually do the work to actually believe you are a good person.
Yeah.
And to know it and to carry that with you everywhere you go.
Right. Yeah. And for me, I always try to feel it in my body. When I have a session with a client and I see that they're proud of themselves, we anchor onto that right away and sense into that because that creates another neural pathway in your brain.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to learn. I mean, I'm not saying, I recognize that it could seem like these things are hard, but it's kind of important that we say it's not that hard when you're really aligned with yourself. Things just flow. Like,
Right.
I mean, I was talking to somebody today who they were struggling with their speech when they were getting self-conscious. And I said to them, I was like, listen, your whole face is just going to move normally if you're just feeling good. We don't need to do anything else except just get you to feeling good with you, and it will all just take care of itself.
Exactly. So I'm wondering, thank you for explaining these 3 columns. It's great. I love your method, but I'm just wondering if we can talk a little bit about pelvic pain. As you know, the name of the podcast, Beyond the Pelvis, and a lot of these symptoms that people have and sensations, people treat the exact same way. But I'm just curious when I talk about pelvic pain, if you've had a lot of clients with pelvic pain and if you treated it exactly the same way or you feel there's a difference between that.
It's a great
And
question.
back pain.
So first I'll say I have treated people with pelvic pain. I've treated people with just symptoms head to toe, all different kinds. And I would say there are some areas where it's the same and some areas where it's different. And so, the general principles are all the same. The columns are still going to apply. The way that they operate is going to apply. But the belief systems about that part of the body can be very different. The symbolism of that part of the body can be very different. And so ultimately what you're going to look for is, what does this mean to the person? I suspect this is a big part of the work that you do with this, is that there's a lot of meaning built into that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think there are general rules of thumb that you can use to guide you in the process of understanding what's going on and how to work with it. But ultimately, you've got to get at the specifics of the sufferer's mind. And that includes, how do they relate to that body part?
Right.
What do they think about that body part? By the way, Laura, I'll also say this. I think pelvis and the back actually share certain things in common. And part of it is that they are very centrally located. So you get people thinking when they're in greater danger emotionally, they tend to get more symptoms in areas that affect everything.
Right.
And so they don't tend to get hand pain as much. That can happen, although that usually is about, agency.
Right. Yeah.
But when it comes to the pelvis or the back or anything very, very central, they can't really move around without that. So it's also about, what does the symptom do to the person? What is it symbolizing and what it's doing? How disabling is it?
Right. Yeah. Sometimes when people have pelvic pain, it's protecting them from being intimate with their partner because that feels dangerous.
I mean, I will say this, and I'm sure this is right up your alley. I have found that there's usually a lot of themes about intimacy or maybe moving forward in life, like with having kids, things that are just natural to that area are getting expressed.
Right. Yeah. I had a client once that her and her husband were trying to have a baby. And I met her without the husband and I said, "Do you want a baby?" And she goes, "No, I just want cats."
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. And so, we live in a society, by the way, that is very, very opinionated about what you're supposed to do in this arena. I find that there's a huge amount of judgment towards people who decide not to have kids, which I think is very unfair. I love my kids. I'm very glad I had them. But first of all, people need to make their own choices. And second of all, we got to stop judging each other for whatever we choose. And if we don't, all kinds of symptoms come up.
Yeah. I'll tell you, you bring up judgment, and it's one of the things, the biggest lessons I've learned in therapy. I stopped judging myself a lot. And by that, me doing that, I stopped judging other people a lot and approached them with a lot of compassion and curiosity instead of judgment.
I think that's wonderful, and it's something I observed in myself. I always thought of myself as a non-judgmental person, but I think more accurately, I was somebody who meant to be non-judgmental. Like it was part of my value system.
Right.
But when I looked at it, there were all kinds of judgments that had kind of either been built into me or maybe I just had on my own. And it was very freeing to me, and it has made my work much better. The fact that I really kind of learned any judgment that I have is about my relationship with me. So why am I even bringing it here? Let me just find out who this person is. The more I can find out about who they are without the judgment, the more accurately I'm going to understand it, who they are and what they need. And I don't need to judge it at all. And part of it is I now understand much more that the only person I know about where they should go in their lives is myself.
Right.
I don't know that for anybody else. But I also trust them much more because I now know that they're the ones who know.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So I'm just curious if you had to give one bit of advice to someone listening out there that has been either a lesson you learned or something you feel is really important that should be the first thing they tackle in their healing journey, what would that be?
Great question, and there's many to choose from. But my go-to one on this usually is this. Because I think doubt is so important, I have a line that I say, which is, you make sense and your symptoms make sense. You can't make sense of anything if you're willing to entertain that it might just be random, or you can't figure it out. Like, I promise you make sense. I promise you your symptoms make sense. We just have to figure out how. My system's one way to find out about that. And I find that it works really well. But the bottom line is what I'd want everybody doing, no matter what they're doing, is thinking, you make sense and your symptoms make sense. That's the first step. And when I had the back pain, I didn't make sense. And my symptoms didn't make sense, or at least it seemed that way. It turned out to not be true. If I had known that right from the start, I would have been in a much better place.
As soon as I realized my pelvic pain made sense, it was a big turning point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't, nothing can get you spinning in doubt more than you're not even making sense. You don't even know why it's happening.
Right. Yeah.
How are you supposed to solve a problem where it's random?
Exactly.
You can't. The good news is it isn't random at all.
No, it's not random. People think the symptoms even come out of nowhere. They don't.
Never.
Exactly. And when they start seeing that, it's like, I get so excited, and I could see their eyes light up and being like, oh, wow, she's right. They didn't come just out of the blue.
Yeah. And as soon as we know that, then the next symptom's not nearly as scary, and we've got things we can do about it, or at least we know what the project is.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can just let everyone know where they can find you. And we know you have a book, and I promise I put on my list to read, and then only if you'll personally sign it for me when I see you next. And
I'm happy to.
Yeah. So just let everyone know where they can find you.
So the first thing is I've got a website that has all of my resources, including my book on it. It's www.crushingdoubt.com. And not only is the book on there, but my teaching seminars are on there. If you prefer a video format or something that's shorter, that gets you right to understanding how to understand the whole mind-body experience and why one person says this and one person says that. It also has links to my group membership. I meet with people regularly on a weekly or sometimes multiple times a week basis. It's all about answering questions and getting people a sense of direction in what to do. So we answer questions, and then there's usually some recommendations. That's all on my website. You can get my book on the website at www.crushingdoubtbook.com. That's the direct link right to the book. And actually, I'm currently running a promotion where people can get a discount on the seminars if they buy the book from there. You can get signed copies from there as well. But you can also just get it on Amazon. Just search for Crushing Doubt, Dan Ratner, and there it is.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners do, and you've given our listeners a lot of tools that they can apply to their healing. So thank you very much.
It is my pleasure, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Pelvis. I hope it gave you something to think about, feel into, or just a reminder that you're not alone on this path. If you're looking for deeper support, check out the Pelvic Healing Circle, a live guided space with somatic practices, breath work, and a real conversation to help you feel more grounded and connected to your body. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, leave a review, or come say hi. I love hearing what resonates. Until next time, keep listening to your body and be gentle with yourself. You're doing great.